How's it going, everybody? It's Riley's Redzone here, and in today's video, we are predicting every Week 11 game. We are already getting into the double digits now for second week of the NFL season. And just like last week, we are going to continue the guest pick series. So today, Matthew makes some choices for this week's games. We had Charlie on last week, and now you can always reach out to me if you are looking to be featured, as I think it's a great opportunity to see another opinion of, maybe someone outside of what I'm thinking that also might not quite be what the public opinion is, and kind of a good mix of, so I think it kind of gives a good median between the two, perhaps, to kind of see what somebody's thinking. So with that being said, we're going to go through every game this week. We do have some contrasting picks, and we also have some similar picks, and it's different than what we had with Charlie last week. This week we do have some unanimous upsets and also still a little bit of differentiating picks, so it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. Unfortunately, I started with a loss this week compared to last week. Last week was a really good week. I ended up going, I believe it was 11-3, but we started this week off with a loss. I thought the Packers were maybe just going to ride on some momentum. I mean, they look good against the Cowboys, finally getting, Christian Watson's been going the last few weeks, and I thought that they'd have a good shot to, kind of turn, not fully turn, but I'd say pretty well turn the season around. And the Titans have been a really solid football team. I thought it would be a really close game, but the Packers didn't really show up to play. And at this point, I think you almost just got to consider them not making it's weird because for this many years, I've never really felt confident in ever saying that they're out of it. But right now, it's looking hard to think that they're in it. So Titans got the win. Unfortunately, I start with the loss that week. But now we start the picks for the rest of the games. And right off the bat, we do have a contrasting opinion. I'm going to go with the Giants. I think it's, for me, the safe choice. But for that reason, I actually like this pick here for Matthew as an upset. The Lions have shown a lot of abilities to kind of be that spoiler team. They've pulled off a few wins in a row, which is interesting this season. They've had some stretches where they seem like they can kind of just get it going. I mean, even Jared Goff at times can be a pretty decent quarterback for the team. And at other points, they lose games. You just question how. I think this is a solid upset pick that definitely, if you get that one right, you're getting a leg up on the picks this week. I definitely think that is a solid choice. I'm kind of playing it safe here in this one. I like what the Giants are doing this year. Dabble is a candidate for Coach of the Year. I mean, with the roster they had, he's really been able to get that team to do well. So I'm going with a safer choice there, but that is a pretty solid upset pick. We both have the Bills, who, of course, end up losing last week to the Vikings. I barely had the Vikings there. I did pick them, but they barely, the Vikings barely won that game. The Bills, I think, still, could be considered Super Bowl favorites, but we've kind of seen then, when things go wrong, what kind of has to happen. And I don't think the Browns are a team that can maximize that and take advantage of that. So we're in agreement here. I think the Bills take care of business there against the Browns. And so the next one is an interesting game. I actually think this is one of the harder ones to pick this week. The Rams have just been really disappointing, but it's one of those teams that I just am going to put some faith in here that I think they will bounce back. So I'm setting my pick there, but the favorite is the Saints. The Saints, I feel like on paper aren't a team that you would think is going to get some wins, but they've been pulling off a few victories this season and still kind of keeping their name just in the race a little bit. Even with Andy Dalton at quarterback, it seems what they're going that direction. I think this game will be really, really close. I mean, the Rams losing Cooper Kupp is huge, but I still think just at some point, even though Stafford hasn't been playing good, I think that one every 4 games he can do a decent performance. So I think that this week could be one of those games. So I'm going to go with the Rams here, an upset pick on that one. I think that's going to be a 50-50 though, real close. Now, this is something, the next few things are, last week when I did it with Charlie, we didn't have an agreement on an upset. Basically, we never both picked the underdog in a game. This happened twice this week. The Bears, to me, have just been playing so well over the last few weeks, Justin Fields specifically. It it kind of makes it hard to think they won't win a game. And I think that going out against the Falcons, who looked sluggish last week, versus the Panthers, um, I think that it's the safer pick to pick the Bears. I don't know how the Falcons are favored in this, to be honest. So I'm 100% down with this upset pick here, because I think that the Bears just have been playing good football. I do think the Falcons might need to turn to Desmond Ridder at some point. Mariota has shown, the mobility there, but I just think, on an accuracy standpoint, hasn't been quite there. If he gets a bounce back game, though, that would be good. He just, I think, started the season pretty okay, and now maybe just kind of keeping it slow on the offense. I think they got to pick it up a little bit. So we're in agreement here. Upset Bears. Commanders, we both think we'll keep it rolling versus the Texans. It's just hard to pick the Texans against almost anybody. And the Commanders beat the Eagles last week, which was, very unexpected. Huge win for them. Heineke puts up a, not a great fantasy performance, but goes out and gets a win, and that's all that really matters. And so I think they continue that this week. I think he is the best quarterback that gives them the best chance to succeed right now. So I think the Heineke will keep things rolling. And now the next game was very interesting. This, I'm going to say, for me, was, I think, the hardest game to put a pick down. For me, it is. I think it's the hardest game because we've seen these teams play this season. It was relatively close. And the Patriots won at the Jets. So we've already seen this season the home field advantage. Maybe doesn't play an aspect. It's just, I think that they split the series. On paper, though, it makes sense to pick the Patriots. They are the favored. A lot of people are picking them, but we are in agreement here. We're both going with the Jets. They have a surprisingly good record, but I just think it's overall they're going to split the series. And the quarterback play from New England has not been top tier. Neither has Zach Wilson for the Jets, but I just think that the Jets have a little bit better roster right now overall. And, Sauce Gardner can play some solid corner there. So I'm going to take the Jets as well. I think this is a good upset pick. It's interesting that they are. I just basically think it comes down to I think they can split the series with the Patriots. Then the Panthers and Ravens, the Panthers come off beating the Falcons last week. But I think the Ravens are one of the better teams in football right now. Lamar is showing that ability as he did a few years ago. I think the Ravens are the good choice here. We're in agreement on that one. They're the favorite, and I think that they are a safer bet over the Panthers, who I believe have to start Baker Mayfield again this weekend. That's going to seem interesting. That's the way they have to go. I don't know if that's really unfortunate because I don't think you'd be, with the way he was playing earlier this season, looking to start him. But Baker is going to get the shot again this week. Then we have the Eagles, Colts. Colts get a win last week with Jeff Saturday. I will tell you this: they're getting a spark because of it, and I think that interim head coaches historically have actually, this is yet another example. We've seen it countless times over the last few years. Even this season, the Panthers go out and get a win with Steve Wilkes. Right after they fire Matt Rule. I believe that was the week they beat the Bucs this year. And then we have Jeff Saturday go get the job, go out, beat the Raiders. But I still always go back to a few years ago. The Texans got a win with Romeo Crennel pretty shortly after he was hired. I believe Versace for the Raiders last year was pretty close. It was either the first game back or one after that. So you can get some momentum going, and I do think it was the right choice. Right now, the Colts are playing like a better football team, but I just would have to think the Eagles have to bounce back unless they pull like what the Steelers did last year, that where they start really, really well and then they kind of fall apart. But I would think that the Eagles can bounce back. Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown are playing at a great level. So I'm going to go that direction. Raiders Broncos. Speaking of the Raiders, this is like a game between two teams that I would seriously probably not pick either one of them unless they're playing against each other. Um, maybe it's like, yeah, I think they're both better than, let's say, the Texans, but like I just don't have the confidence to pick either of these two teams, so I'm kind of flipping a coin. And I'm basically, this is a risky choice. I'm picking what I think doesn't make sense to happen, if that makes any sense. I just have a feeling that this is going to be a wacky game. I think it's going to be one of those games that doesn't make sense the way it goes, but for that reason, I'm going with the Raiders. This is just a straight feeling game. There isn't much logic to it. I just don't think either of these teams are playing very good football, but I think the Raiders can pull it out. Like, they're playing so bad that you think that they have to bounce back at some point here. Otherwise, you seriously got to consider with both of these two teams. I don't. They're both, have new head coaches, and I don't know if either one of them make it out alive after this season. But I do think that at some point the Raiders just got to sneak out a win. Also, I was looking up the stats with how the Broncos, have lost to the Raiders the last like 6 times. So then, for that same reason, you can easily make a case that they're bound to break it. So this is really a 50-50 game. I'm going to go with the Raiders, but Matthew is going with the Broncos here, and that makes perfect sense. These are just two teams I don't think will win many more football games. So it really, either way you go here makes sense. Then we have the Bengals Steelers, and this is another one. I like the two sneaky games that Matthew pulled off here with the Lions and the Steelers. Both feel like potential sleeper teams. I'm just going to play it safe a little bit. I found that sometimes, like, I've made a few decent upset calls this season. I also think I played a little too risky before. So I'm going to live with, my 3 other upset picks for this week. And my 4, I wasn't even counting that one with the Raiders. So I'm going to go with that. And the Bengals are one of those teams that we've kind of been waiting. The two teams that I would say have been kind of like they're in that upper tier, but they're not in like the top tier with like the Bills, Chiefs, and the Eagles, Vikings record wise, are the Bengals and the Niners. I think are two teams that were really successful last playoffs, and coming into the season, we think they're going to be one of the better teams, and they're performing at like a decent level, but not a top tier team. That's the vibe I'm getting from the Bengals right now. But because they're dealing without Jamar Chase still as well. But I think that they have enough offensive firepower to keep it going. I do like the Steelers pick, though, from Matthew here. I mean, Pickett, I think, can maybe put something on the scoreboard at times. I've not been a huge fan of him, but I definitely think that I picked him last week against the Saints because TJ Watt coming back. He can be a huge difference. So maybe he keeps that rolling for them. So I definitely think that is a good pick there too. From that perspective, I'm going with the Bengals, but that's a close one. This one that I was riding my whole week on, kind of, this actually isn't an upset, but kind of my pick of the week. That's a little bit bold, but not crazy bold. I've been this whole week thinking that the Cowboys will pull off. I'm surprised the Cowboys are favored versus the Vikings. I actually am going to this game tomorrow, so I'll be witnessing it in person. And I think if I go back to, obviously, then I've grown up a Vikings fan. When you're a fan of a team, I think you get something where you're overly optimistic and overly pessimistic at the same time, because you get things like last week where I had belief in that team to win against Buffalo. Specifically when I thought Josh Allen wasn't going to play, but even gets a little bit of a hobbled, even though Allen played phenomenal, out of his mind last week. I had the confidence to make that upset pick, and they get it done. But having grown up a Vikings fan, I think I've seen too many times where this team gets to a spot where you finally think they're in rhythm and they are getting something going, and then it all falls apart. And I think this would be more of a 1 week thing and that they'd bounce back, but I just think they've had too many things go right for it to go another week. So obviously I'll be at the game and hoping that my pick is wrong, but I think that I can't trust And this sounds crazy because they beat the Bills last week of all teams, which are one of the best teams. But I can't fully still put my faith in them running the table against some really, really good teams. I mean, if they could get wins against the Cowboys and the Bills in back-to-back weeks, that just seems out of character almost even. So I'm kind of taking the safe pick. I thought it was going to be an upset, but I'm going with the Cowboys, and so is Matthew as well. We obviously have some type of feeling here in that. Then Chiefs-Chargers. What happened last week is it was Niners-Chargers. And I was this close to picking the Chargers, and I luckily didn't. But I just think that they can light up the scoreboard, but this is one where I got to go with the safe pick. The Chiefs have no reason for me to pick against them. So I'm going to go with, Mahomes, and Kelsey's putting up the scoreboard real well. Now the Chargers might get Mike Williams and Keenan Allen back this week. That would be huge for them. I think that would greatly improve their chances at winning this game, but I can't fully place my confidence in that because it's not sure, and I also just can't doubt the Chiefs, and I think that Matthew has similar logic there. So those are the reasons I'm going with the Chiefs. It kind of is just a safe choice. Can't really fully trust the Chargers without their health knowledge, and then also hard to pick against the Chiefs. And the Niners and the Cardinals. I mentioned it earlier with the Bengals. I think the Niners are one of those teams that kind of just are treading water at a level where they're maybe were last season. They performed so well. You think they're maybe going to take a huge step up. I had this team going to the Super Bowl, and they still might be on pace to get there. I think the McCaffrey get was a huge upgrade for them. So for that reason, I'm still going to pick them. I found it really hard to pick the Cardinals this season. I picked them last year quite a bit, and I believe the first few this year I took some upsets with them, and they just haven't been able to perform. So I can't live picking them with that. So for that reason, I'm taking the safe choice with the Niners here. And Matthew obviously has a similar logic again here on that. So we kind of end on the same note for the last few games. But it's just a safe pick for those last two. So we're going to see what happens this week. Last week was a crazy good week for my record, and I doubt we'll be able to continue. Because it's funny, last week going into it, I actually felt the most confident in those picks that I have probably all of the year. And I felt it this week looking at the game schedule, and I went, wow, there's about 4 of them that I'm a coin flip away. So sometimes you just got to get lucky. So I don't know how this week's going to go, but we're going to keep track of how it goes and just, keep update with the score and see what happens. So I appreciate you watching this video. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next one.